Thank you so much to Calvarez for that video. Well, we're approaching the end of Save and Sound Day 3, the finale. I think we probably have an hour and a half left, so make sure that you stay until the end. Next up, I hope that you're strapped in. If you're on the toilet where streams are really supposed to be watched, hold on to something because this one's a doozy. Ryan Ike, the renowned composer for The West of Loathing, one of my personal favorites, and Where the Water Tastes Like Wine. Hey Ryan, what's the deal with all the westerns, by the way? I forgot to ask you that. Anyway, he's provided us with a really cool look into how the songs change where you are in the game, and just a more general deep dive and its intricacies. Right after that segment, we have Joshua Duchesne, the vocalist and guitarist for Where the Water Tastes Like Wine, and he explains to us how he learned what Ryan sent to him and how he implemented it into the game. And the segment ends with a little bit of acoustic guitar and song. So glad we had these two beautiful human beings for the show. Let's tune in. Yeehaw.
Ike. I am the composer for Where the Water Tastes Like Wine, and I'm really excited to be here as part of Save and Sound to walk you all through the game a little bit, sort of show you some of the process compositionally, what it was like working with all these great performers, and just kind of break down a little bit about how the music functions in this game. So let's get into it. As you can see, we're on the world map here, and it's a literal map. In Where the Water Tastes Like Wine, you kind of wander the actual map of America. And that's kind of your main interaction with things. And you might notice that we don't look great. And that's because we have been cursed. I don't think it's a bad curse to be turned into a skeleton. That seems kind of awesome to me. It seems pretty metal, but to each their own. But we have been tasked with wandering the country and gathering and sharing stories and kind of bringing them back to this wolf spirit that has turned us into this, because we lost a hand of cards in maybe the worst way that you can lose a hand of cards. Bankruptcy, bad. Losing like your soul and kind of also your skin and musculature, maybe arguably worse. And so that's kind of the main idea of the game, is that you wander the map and you run into these kind of fantastical events. You're playing during the Great Depression in America in this kind of fantasy version of America. So these kind of wild things can happen to you. Some are very fantasy oriented. Some are very kind of just mundane trials and struggles you would deal with in the Great Depression, and many are in between. And those become stories that you can share with the main characters you meet. There are a ton of characters in the game that you run into. They all have their own kind of rich stories about their struggle, kind of trying to find their version of the American dream in this awful time. And spoiler alert, it doesn't go great for most of them. And so that's kind of the main conceit, is you meet these people and you share stories with them, they share their stories with you, and then you kind of keep traveling the country, re-sharing these stories with new characters who then share their stories with you. The stories change over time. So as you keep kind of running into the same characters over and over, you might notice that new details of their story pop up, both because they've done new things or because the story has just kind of become more outlandish over time, sort of like a game of telephone as a kid. And that's kind of one of the main conceits here. So that's one thing I wanted to do with the music. Is the point why I'm kind of laying all that out, is I want the music to do that here too. So there is a main track in this game called Vagrant Song that plays a lot when you're on the world map. The world map also cycles in other music from throughout the game, so you're hearing a track right now that is related to a specific character who is a World War I veteran, played by an incredibly talented voice actor and my very good friend Jacob Burgess, with a lot of pathos. It made me very sad. And you're hearing his theme right now. So every character in the game, of which there are many, has their own theme music kind of relating to their background and their time. Time is kind of timey-wimey in this game. So there are World War I vets, there are people from before and after World War I. There are people from the 1960s. It's kind of all over the place. But my point was, another song that you hear on the world map a lot is a song called Vagrant Song. And I wrote multiple versions of it that change and shift depending what area of the country you're in. So right now we are in the Northeast. I had a geography like screw up a second ago because I looked at Portland and went, wait, but it's Portland, Maine, which hopefully you can see if you just look around and realize like, oh, we're on the East Coast. Doy. So in this area, when Vagrant Song does come up and you are exploring this part of the country, you'll hear an Appalachian version of it. There will be banjos. There's kind of a country drawl kind of vocal done by the wonderful Jillian Aversa. And it sounds like it's music, folk music from this area. Because all the music in this game is based on folk music. And the way that it kind of shifts and changes and is a musical style that is shared amongst people. But what I wanted to happen is when you're moving around the country with your little Skelefriend here and you get to a new area, kind of a new region, you'll hear Vagrant Song come up again, but when you're in the deep south, for example, in like Louisiana and Alabama, it'll sound more guitar focused. There's a different vocalist, a guy named Joshua Duchesne, who plays pretty much all the guitar in this entire album. He's amazing. He's like a transformer. I'm like, can you play slide guitar on this one? And he's like, no, I don't know how to do that. And then he goes, bebop, bop, oh, bebop, and then he knows how to do it, like the next day. It's wild. But my point is, when you're in the Deep South, you'll hear Vagrant Song come up again, and it will sound like it's from that region. Then when you're in the Midwest, you might hear it crop up another time, but it has Scandinavian elements to it. And yet another vocalist, really talented lady named Elizabeth Zaroff, who is an opera singer. And I was like, can you do kind of a folk music thing? And she was like, I don't know, maybe. And then the answer is yes. Yes, she can. So this song kind of changes throughout the country, everywhere that you are, kind of reflecting that idea of people, sharing a song around a campfire and then riding the rails, to a new town and sharing it again where someone else might pick it up. And it might change a little bit. And then that person might hitchhike to yet another town. And it might change, a third time. And it just kind of keeps getting new details and new little bits and bobs to it based on the region, based on the performer, based on the instruments they can play or their singing style. This song is kind of a living thing, just like the stories in this game are. And actually right now what you're hearing is one of the versions of Vagrant Song. This is kind of the main theme of the overworld in the game. There are instrumental versions that play as well, because the vocals, while they're great, can be a little distracting to hear all the time in a game where you're listening to voice acting and interacting with people's stories. So we also have instrumental versions that play without the vocals in it, and that's what you're hearing right now. But you can hear, when I'm not talking over it, you can hear this banjo playing that is kind of indicative of this area. You can also hear amazing fiddle playing by Jeff Ball, who is an incredible violinist, and you also hear the guitar that is played by Joshua Duchesne, who I mentioned earlier. Again, he's on almost every track on this album, and in a lot of ways he really makes this soundtrack. I'm not a guitar player myself, so I wrote all the parts for him, but then we did a lot of workshopping kind of back and forth. I died because I forgot to eat because I was too busy talking about the game. So
bad luck again, but there's no shame in dying. Everyone does it.
He's not wrong. So I'll finish up what I was saying before because that should give you a picture of how kind of bleak this game can be, is that I literally spent so much time talking to you about the music that I died. But what you had been hearing was Joshua Duchesne on guitar there. And he plays guitar on almost every track in the game. He plays mandolin. He's a vocalist on like 3 or 4 different tracks in the game, and people don't realize it's him on all of them because he's like a crazy vocal polymorph, and he can just sound like different people. Again, he's like a transformer. It's insane. But part of my point is that, the performances that I managed to get out of people on this soundtrack, the super talented folks I was lucky to work with, really are a lot of why, I'm so proud of this soundtrack, and I think it turned out really, really well, because folk music is super personal. Everybody kind of puts their own vibe into it, their own kind of personal experience, and so a lot of what I did with the performers on this soundtrack was say, here's the part I wrote for you, but if you want to mess with it, throw a little like extra zhuzh, on it here and there, if you want to kind of like decide how you want to play this phrase, or you want to like change things a little bit here and there, like I welcome that. And thankfully, because that can be kind of scary for a performer, pretty much everybody I worked with was like, yeah, that sounds great, and they killed it, and you end up getting, this part that I wrote comes back, and it's better than what I wrote, because they put their own kind of personality into it. And I think that's a lot of why the soundtrack works. I worked with people who were willing to kind of experiment and be willing to kind of just try their own thing based on what I gave them. The track you're hearing right now was one of the last ones I wrote for this entire soundtrack. Every single character you meet has their own theme, except for this guy, the wolf, who is the one who curses you and tasks you with wandering the country, because you lose at a hand of cards with him. And just because of time constraints and the way game development works, I kind of wasn't sure I would have time to write something for him. But it ended up being the case where every other character you meet and talk to had a theme, and it felt weird that he didn't. So I managed to squeeze it in. And I have this fun disease as a composer where whatever track just kind of falls out of my butt at the end of the process. Like every other song I write, I spend forever laboring over it, kind of tweaking it forever, probably longer than I should. And then there's always one track that it's like, oh God, I need to do this one too. I don't have time. Here. And then that one ends up being one of my favorites, and often one of, players' favorites. And I should probably do some self-reflection and learn something from that, but I'm not gonna. And you can't make me. Also. Oh, this is one of my favorite ones.
Hey there, stranger. You're welcome to enjoy this fire with me. If you're respectful, that is.
Quinn is great. Quinn is a little kid. Kid with a knife. Sweet combo. And they are kind of just riding the rails. That's their whole thing, is that they hop on boxcars. They just kind of make their way from town to town. So the track you're hearing now is their theme. It's called Railhoppin. And Joshua tells me it's pretty simple to play, which I don't believe, because I'm not a guitar player, but it sounds hard. But it's just a synthesized banjo. Again, the banjo is not real, because it was tricky to find a banjo player, but because of Joshua's amazing live guitar playing, you don't really notice. And again, that's kind of a tool I used a lot on this soundtrack, is having one or two live performers on every track that I could, and it just makes all the artificial stuff we have to use in game development sound better anyway. So yeah, just kind of trying to give the vibe of you're chilling in a boxcar as it cruises through middle America, and you're heading towards whatever town you're going to stop off in next. Every night a new place is kind of this character's idea. And it was really fun to go through this cast of characters and write a different theme for every one of them. I got to do a lot of different backgrounds. Some are really tragic, some are kind of more fun and upbeat, like this one. They come from all kind of different cultures. Right, so here you're getting a bit of Jillian's vocals on this one. Again, she's a lot of people kind of went outside their comfort zone on this one. She's typically more of an operatic singer, and I asked if she could do kind of a country thing on this one. She was like, I think so, and the answer was yeah. Okay, so now we're in the South, and this is sort of what I was talking about. You can hear that this is Vagrant Song again. Same one we were hearing up in Appalachia, but it's got more of a southern kind of flavor to it. Hear Joshua's amazing guitar playing. Just every single crazy thing I asked him to do, he was like, sure, and just did it. Well, I'm gonna scroll my name on the bare bones of the earth. I'm gonna dig my heels into the ground. This is also him on vocals. He's an incredible singer. This is also a good time to point out that this is one of, personally for me, one of my first soundtracks that I've written lyrics for. Most of my music throughout my career has been instrumental up to this point, so this is kind of one of my first stabs at writing, vocals with words, and I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. And I'm Midwestern, so complimenting myself and being proud of anything is essentially impossible for me. So you're all kind of witnessing a miracle right now. Do with that what you will.
trains run out of track. Won't be no one else to dig my hole.
That's, I think, kind of one of the final points I want to make is that so much of the soundtrack revolved around me relying on my performers. Like, I wrote everything. Sure, I wrote all the music, I wrote all the lyrics. But then so much of it was getting feedback from them on like, hey, I'm from this culture, this would sound more authentic if you did this. Or what if we changed the lyrics a little bit, to kind of reflect this area? Or what if I did this like little like guitar solo? Or if I changed the part you gave me just a bit to kind of like add a little personal flair. Like, so much of what makes this soundtrack work, I hope it works. And what I think makes it kind of special is how much personality and just passion these performers put into things, and how much they shaped it, in addition to me just writing everything. So it's really singular amongst all the soundtracks I've done in my career. It's really special in that way, and thank you for hanging out with me while I kind of walked you through it. So thank you so much for sticking around and taking a look at the soundtrack with me. It's really one of my favorite things that I've ever gotten to work on, and I really appreciate you kind of walking through it with me. So please enjoy the rest of Save and Sound, and thanks for coming.
Hi there, I'm Joshua Duchesne. I'm an audio multidisciplinarian. I currently work on Halo Infinite as an audio technical designer, and I was also a guitarist and vocalist, as well as some other things, on the soundtrack for Where the Water Tastes Like Wine. And that's what I'm here to talk to you about today. So first, I want to thank everybody who has played the game, who's listened to the music, and especially those of you who have sent us comments and messages about how you enjoyed the music in the game. It means a ton to us. This was a labor of love, and we are absolutely thrilled anytime we hear any positive feedback about it. So thank you. One thing I wanted to do to sort of give back a bit is explain a bit of the process that we went through to create this robust and beautiful soundtrack. And I want to tell a little story that I think is kind of fun, and then at the end I'll try to perform a tiny piece of one of the songs that often gets requested. So what was the process of learning all these different songs and performing them and recording them and getting this soundtrack assembled that has 30 songs on it in a relatively short time frame? Well, the first thing that would happen is Ryan would send us, the performers, a set of written notes as well as some demo tracks that we would then use to learn the songs. And learn kind of the feeling, the story behind them, and all that sort of stuff. And then from there, we'd go on our merry way and produce them. But it's not just as easy as get notes and then play the song, record it, and send it off, and it's done. There's a lot of work that goes into making sure that all those steps are crafted and done in a way that really conveys the story and the feeling that the composer is trying to get across. So Ryan would send really, really detailed notes so that I knew exactly the feeling he was trying to convey, the character this song was about, the part of the story it was trying to tell, because ultimately this is a storytelling game, and the music needs to be a continuation of that, an extension of that, so that the story is told through every element of the music, not just the lyrics, necessarily, not just the style, but everything from the way it's performed, to the way it's recorded, to the way it's produced. So the first thing I would do when Ryan would send me a new song is that I would listen to it, and I would have my lovely guitar Maribel with me, and I would literally just pick it out note by note, chord by chord, and write them down as I went, so that I had my own kind of personalized sheet music that I would then use to learn the song really rapidly. So step 2, learn the song really rapidly. I would take the notes that I'd written and try to learn the different parts. So I'll use Railhoppin as an example because it's in my opinion, a relatively easy song from the soundtrack. I even produced a tutorial on it, so if you're interested, check out my YouTube page where I have a tutorial on how to learn to play Railhoppin. So with this song, I would learn the notes. Okay, cool. Learning it. Sounds good. And then once I had mastered it and I had it in my head and I could just play it flawlessly all the way through, the next thing would be to take the story, take the character, and really begin to imbue it. And so at that part, I started to think really creatively about how can I convey the feeling of, in this case, riding on a train, because this song is about hopping on train cars and riding the rails across the country. And so rather than just playing those notes sort of open like this, I decided if I can have a big, chunky, heavy palm mute, oh yeah, that's going to give that feeling of a train car when it goes cha-chunk, 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 cha-chunk. Yeah. So that was the next step, is how do I imbue it with that character, imbue it with the story? And then once I've done that and I'm able to perform it in a way that really tells the story, the next thing is, can I just record this in my dry studio environment, or do I need to do something different to it? So in the case of this song, I decided to actually record this inside of a literal wooden box. Now that might sound crazy, but the place I was living at the time had a wooden sauna, a really nice cedar wood sauna, and so I went inside the sauna and I figured this environment actually has that nice kind of boomy boxy sound. Now sometimes performers and producers will decide to add that in post using an impulse response reverb or something like that, or a little slapback delay, but I wanted this to really be baked in. I wanted it to really feel like you're in that environment. And so I decided to record this inside of a wooden box sauna to give me that true feeling, that true sound of being in like a boxcar. And not only that, but the next step is, how do I mic the guitar? There's billions of microphone techniques that you can use to mic a guitar, but in this case, I wanted you to really hear that chunky down here when I'm palm mute and when I'm hitting the guitar. I want you to really hear that and feel that. I want it to be like very, very present so that you really have the sensation that you're in that train car. And additionally, the song has a ripping solo, so I wanted you to really hear and feel that too, almost like the wind whipping through your hair. And so what I did is I decided to use a stereo miking technique using two of these Octava MK012s. Love these microphones. I had one mic facing the lower bridge, one mic facing the top nut, so that way you could hear both that chunky low end and that ripping solo. So these are all the little things that go into the details that make the songs really come to life. I did similar things with some of the characters because I was also the vocalist for most of the songs as well, and so I would dress up like the character. So for example, White Rider, I studied Johnny Cash because I really, really, really wanted to master and capture a feel that was similar to what he conveyed. And so I watched his posture when he would perform live. I tried to mimic the way his face and mouth were shaped when he would sing, because all those things have an effect, right? They make a difference with how it sounds in the end. And every one of those details stacked up on top of one another end up producing a really convincing and compelling story. Music that people from around the world listen to, and they don't realize that I'm some kind of metal rocker from Seattle. Some people thought that I was literally from the Deep South because I was able to capture and perform and convey those characters through deep, intense study and also acting as the character when performing the parts. So that's a bit about the process that I would go through to get from A to Z. And I wanted to tell a little story that I think is kind of fun. After we'd wrapped up the soundtrack and everything was feeling good and groovy, Ryan messaged me, and at the time I was in Thailand, and he said, "Dude, I totally don't know how we missed this, but Sting's character, the wolf," so I don't know if you know this, but Sting, like the Sting, was one of the voice actors on the game, and he was voice acting the character of the wolf. And so Ryan's like, I needed to write a song for that character, and so I did, and it's very guitar heavy, but I realize you're in Thailand, and you don't probably have your guitar with you. And I was like, no, I don't, but believe you me, we're gonna make this work. And so I ended up hopping on my motorcycle and driving to a mall, and I picked up a Thai mall guitar, and that's this guitar right here, good old Nashville. And so Nashville here is also on the soundtrack, and it worked out perfectly because Ryan wanted kind of a gritty, dirty sounding guitar, and so I ended up buying this guitar, and it sounded exactly like I needed it to. When I was testing it in the store, I was like, this is perfect. I tuned it down to drop C. Oh, so dirty. And went to town on it, and I sent Ryan a little 3-second clip of me playing it, and I was like, how does this sound, dude? So that's a little story that I thought was kind of fun about what you'll go through to achieve the art that you want to achieve. You'll hop on a motorcycle and ride through a foreign country where you don't speak the language, you're reading the signs, and you'll buy a cheap mall guitar, which I somehow got back as a carry-on all my flights. It was awesome. They didn't question me once. I thought I was going to have to leave it there. Nope, got it back. Perfect. This is also the guitar, if you notice, if you watch the Railhoppin tutorial video, this is the guitar I give the tutorial on, because I recorded that in Thailand as well. So, anyway, fun little story. Hope that's enjoyable. Thanks so much for watching. To wrap this up, I'm going to attempt to play the intro and the first verse and chorus from Heavy Hands. Now, a disclaimer, I haven't played this song in over 5 years, I'm not even kidding, so I'll do the best I can. I hope you enjoy it. If I turn my eyes from these cold blue skies, won't stay my breeze, won't come or quell. I can say my piece, I can barter my tale, won't ease my burden, but I might as well. There's a heavy hand laid across this land, and it steers my journey and it guides my pen. Press on head high till the ink is running dry, 'cause my story ain't like to wind home again. Yeah, ooh, well, I beat my drum till the last day comes, where the mountain meets the sea. Yeah, the earth will shake, but the bow she break won't put no fear in me. 'Cause I see the land on high, so I pen my final line. Sky will shimmer and sun will shine, where the water tastes like wine. Thank you. I hope this has been an amazing evening for everyone. Thanks for joining us on this journey and listening to these stories. And go forth, be good to one another, and yeah, be well. Thanks.